was the schedule, but we're running a bit behind. 6:30 we're supposed to kick off. I just want to open the floor for, in fact, I should really start with saying, I'm Monique. I'm Monique, as Antoinette. But yeah, we just want to open the floor and introduce Dr. Victoria Shawunmi, who was wonderful enough to actually give us this space to make this event possible. So, without further ado, can we just give her a...
Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm actually based here, so as Monique and Antoinette, isn't it?
Yeah.
Antoinette actually said, I'm an academic here, and I always try to, people knock on my door, try and open up the space and say, look, if you do it this particular way, I'm sure you can actually get it wrong. But you have to kind of involve my name somewhere, otherwise it becomes a bit problematic. You know what it's like trying to book rooms, and otherwise they charge you. They're charging for rooms, so that's me. Just a little bit, just the housekeeping, so you know the housekeeping, because that's important, but then hopefully we're not going to fire up, and if there is, you can go to the exits, different exits either side, just follow the routes there, do not use the lift. Toilets as well. Ladies, got the signs, so you can either side, alright, so that's that. We've got refreshments up here, you don't need to worry, but if you did need a hot drink, there is a Costa downstairs, which I think is open to about 7:30, so there's that as well. Anything else you need? I think that's it for housekeeping. You can open the windows if you need to, but and on this floor it's not so bad, it's not so noisy on this floor, so you can actually open those if you require. What else do I need to tell you? I'm supposed to just tell you a couple of sentences about myself. I'm a bit kind of worn out because I've been teaching all the afternoons, a bit tired. Yeah, I've got a doctorate from the University of Sheffield. That's where I got mine from. I recognise presumably all of your doctoral students. It's a journey. It's a very large journey depending where you're on, whether you're in your first year, whether you're in your last year. It's a journey. So when students turn around and say to me, I say to them, oh, how long have you got? They say, oh, we're just doing the write-up, that'll be a couple of months. And I kind of laugh. And the reason I laugh is because that takes time. That's when the editing time starts place, and you're kind of grappling with the monster, if you see what I mean. So that's when it can take at least 6 months just to do the editing. So that's what I'd say. The other thing I'd say to you is, who am I? When you ask me the question, who am I? I'm a feminist, and I have no apology about that. My work is in gender, and it's not that I dislike men, it's the fact that I'm very passionate about women, and so that's what my area is. And within that, also, I'm very much, I've very much linked my work into intersectional work as well. So when we talk about gender, I'm always knocking on the door and saying, well, what do you think about women like me? And it causes a gasp of breath because they haven't talked about gender, they think about race, and then they can't put the two together. So, I'm that elephant in the room always talking about that. So that's another aspect of who I am. Another part of who I am, I suppose, which is quite significant, is that one of the things I bring in, and I've just written a piece which hopefully should be published in a kind of a different kind of genre, but it's chicken, is it called Chicken Soup? So I've just written this piece in that, which will come out, and it's for young teenagers, and it's around inspirational stories. And one of the things I've shared in that particular thing, which is going to be part of my bigger book, which is around when I look at who I am, which I think I'd like to just leave this with you and perhaps finish, is when I look at who I am, I talk about the notion of being socialised right and what that means. And identity is very, very important to me because I was brought up by white German Jewish parents within the context of Somerset. So you can imagine all what's going on with that, okay? So I write about that, which I think is a really interesting experience, but I don't write about it as a fact of, what's the word? Kind of poor little child, kind of whatever, lots of roots, whatever. I write about it as an intellectual and kind of mirroring experience which we can work with as a methodology as well. So that's what I want the book to be as well. So that's who I am. And I work with a range of students, mostly doctoral students, master's students, and sometimes I do BA or BEd students as well. I think is that enough about me? Yeah, I think that will would do. Any problems? I'm in age 9, I'm not going to be there all night. That's my rule. So anybody want to ask a quick question before I disappear as such? Otherwise I'm going to... Yes. Okay, so enjoy the evening, I'm sure you will. I hope you're coming in a couple of weeks. And also I've got my own black doctoral group, which we meet every couple of, maybe twice a term, which is aimed at black doctoral students in London. But that's really aimed at UCL, because we know UCL is the powerhouse. UCL and the local universities around my birthday, so as things like that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's quite an informal session. So we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we met, how we became part of the Black Doctoral Network, and I suppose the benefits of it and why we think it's beneficial for you guys to network with each other, with us, and etc. etc. So to cut a long story short, or in fact I should start with a question. Has anyone ever felt isolated on their PhD journey? Okay. Okay, right. So there was an event called Black Women in Academia that I happened to go to, and I didn't know many people doing the same journey, because your family, they love you, they support you, but they don't necessarily understand. So when I went to this, I was fascinated and happy to meet so many different people. And this is where I met Antoinette. So from then, I suppose the experience alone that we can empathise with each other kind of cemented our friendship before it even got off the ground. Then we went to, I was responding to a call for papers with the Black Doctoral Network, which is founded in New York. It's in its 3rd year now. And so I went over there to present. Antoinette, did you find out about it by yourself?
No.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I mentioned it to Antoinette, so Antoinette came along. And then we also became friends with another girl who hasn't arrived yet over there, because she was presenting. She was at Queen Mary at the time. And we became friends. And I found the friendship between the 3 of us very useful, and just to talk about academic stuff and just the journey, basically. And when we were there, it was really fascinating to see black professors, black doctoral students, master students presenting their research, and you're quite good at talking about this.
I think we're skipping over that. So for me personally, I grew up in London, have been educated in London, so from 0 to 25. And I've never, ever, with my own 2 eyes, seen a black professor. It took me having to go to Philly to actually just see a room full of them, and for me that was a lot. So that was like October 2013. So going there, that made me actively look, okay, hold on, there has to be some black professors here. Thankfully, by me actually going there and thinking, okay, I need to find the ones that are here, I managed to meet Professor Anne Phoenix, who's here. But it was just an experience within itself, just that going into a room just with black scholars, like a room bigger than this. So yeah, so that was an experience itself. I think Cornel West was the keynote speaker at the conference as well. And he was so warm and just willing to listen to our perspective as well, being black British scholars.
Yeah. So, okay. And I mean, and around this time, as you lot probably are aware, past couple of years, there's been a lot of stuff that's kind of resurfaced in, I don't know if you would say in the media, but about the lack of black professors and lack of black scholars and all this sort of stuff. So it kind of all came to a head for us, I think.
And then at that time, as we came back, that's when we that's when I got to see Nathan's documentary as well. So it was like a key moment.
What's your documentary called again?
Absent from the
Yeah, just so that everyone, just in case they didn't know. No, I couldn't from the academy. And yeah, so when we went to the Black Doctoral Network in 2013, we met the founder of the network, and it's quite funny actually, because he was experiencing isolation over there as well. So although I suppose the journeys are, I suppose the location affects or gives you different nuances to your PhD experience, the sense of isolation was the same there. And he said that he wanted it to be a global network. He wanted people to be able to network across the diaspora within as well. And so that's when we just became UK ambassadors, to try and get people here talking, networking, because it's important for me to know that if I want to do collaborative work on education and race, then obviously I know that you do that. But then at least I know that there's someone that I can speak to about that, possibly to do work on, or Antoinette may know someone that can help me or put me in touch with somebody, the appropriate person, to help me along the way of my journey. So we found that networking was really, really important. And so
That's kind of part of that's the reason why we're here today.
yeah,
Why, personally, why we think that networking is very important. Just to add, I don't know how deep I should go into this, but my personal PhD journey has not been that smooth. So I started off at Queen Mary. I'm not at Queen Mary anymore, I'm here. So the network was very integral in helping me make that transition, and also Dr. Danger as well, because one time I did email you, and yeah, if you could see me whilst I was emailing you, I'd probably cry. But yeah, because that's just how it was. So having people to speak to really allowed me to move on, because there's a lot of people who start somewhere, they stop, and then they don't continue. So I personally don't want anyone to have to go through that. So that's part of the reason why pushing for the network as well.
so I think that's us. Oh, in fact, one more thing. I've just on your tables I've put calls for paper. Oh, this just on the table. This is just call for papers for the next one, the next conference that I have in October. It's in Atlanta. Feel free to submit abstracts if you're interested. Unfortunately, you'll have to pay your own travel. But if you want international conferences under your belt, this is just a place where you could start.
And although you have to pay for yourself, it really is worth it. It is like a big deal, and yeah, it is a lot of money, but it's worth it. And this time around, we really would like if more of us could go over, because we are black and we are in the sense of just generally, but there are specific nuances that they, as in African Americans, need to understand about us, and I feel us going over there and having those conversations would be a really good thing to happen.
They were fascinated with my presentation on grime music, but that's a whole nother thing. Alright, so now we just want to, Dr. Daly, Dr. Andrews, just open up the floor to them. Dr. Hakeem Adi will be arriving, he's coming from outside London, so he will be here.
He's now a professor.
Yes, Professor, yes, sorry, my mistake. But yes, just for you guys to share, I suppose, maybe aspects of your journey that you think are poignant that may help us, or give us insights into what you're doing now. Just maybe about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes each, and then if you guys have any questions, provided they're not too many, then we can squeeze those in as well. Alright,
And I don't mean to be forward, but please do ask questions. Like, if I did not reach out and speak to Dr. Daly, I would not be, I don't think I would have had the confidence to actually try and go to another institution and try and start again. So please, even if it's not like a specific question like subject related or or whatnot, if it's just a general question, please do ask.
Well, good evening, everyone. As I said, my name is Patricia Daly, and I am Associate Professor at the University of Oxford at Jesus College. I have been at Oxford for many, many years. I'm so embarrassed now to even tell you how long I've been there, but certainly more than 20. And I suppose I really admire Monique and Antoinette for starting this great initiative. The PhD, doing a PhD, as they say, is very lonely. It's lonely in itself, even if you're not black. It's you know, writing and being creative is a very demanding, you know, of you intellectually, socially. You have to abandon your friends for a while. You have to abandon a whole set of other activities and just focus. It obviously takes determination, but you also need support. You need to be able to stop and go off and talk to people, and talk to people who are going to be supportive. So it's great to have a network in that sense, and for people to at least be there to listen to you when you think you're not going to make it, or when you're struggling. to formulate and understand a particular problem. In my own journey, I think I was thinking about it on the way up from Oxford. I think my academic journey was relatively straightforward, which is a bit embarrassing to say. I mean, I did a first degree. I'm a human geographer. I work on the political geography of Africa. I did a first degree in geography. I did a PGCE. I taught in the school for almost 3 years, and I thought this is not for me. I did a master's in African studies. I got a PhD. I then went, actually, like Antoinette, I started my PhD at UCL here, and then at the end of the first year, I didn't have any money, and I thought, I need a grant, and so then at the end of the first year, or during my first year, I met someone from Oxford who was saying, if you want to work on refugees in Africa, come to Oxford, because we're starting up this program. And so I went there, I applied, and they took me, and I got funding from the ESRC, or as a Social Science Research Council, as it was known then. So it was relatively, I didn't have to pay anything out of my pocket, which is a terrible thing to say. But yeah, it was relatively a straightforward process in that sense. That doesn't mean that it wasn't painful, right? And it wasn't isolating. And I was really fortunate because, irrespective of what you might think about Oxford, I was in Oxford at a time when there was a really dynamic crowd of African and Caribbean scholars, right, doing PhDs and masters. Some of them have remained my lifelong friends. They're really, and we used to meet at lunchtime and have debates, mainly about African problems or problems in the world. But it was really great because you could stop what you're doing, go on, fight it out with somebody about what's happening in some African country, and then go back and carry on working again. So it really helped. So I wasn't isolated. Obviously, you're isolated when you're focused on your own, but I wasn't isolated doing my PhD because of that body of support of young academics who were at Oxford. And many of them have gone on to become professors in universities in Africa, and one or two have gone to North America. And in fact, one returned and is now my colleague in Oxford. He's in political science, and some of you might know Dr. Ralph Mustafa is from Nigeria. So even within the context of Oxford, as an academic in Oxford, there are one or two black academics who we can relate to. I think in terms of the PhD experience, I think what you need initially is a supportive supervisor. You need to find, and you've all started the journey, so I suppose you have found somebody who understands what you're doing, who's prepared to let you develop, because that's part of the key to supervision. Some supervisors will try and guide you and say, you've got to use this theory, you've got to use this approach, and that might work in the sciences or but not necessarily so in the social sciences. And you will have your view, you will have your passion about what you want to write. And it's a very difficult, it can be quite a delicate process of negotiation with your supervisor. I mean, my supervisor actually didn't work on Africa, he worked on the Caribbean. I actually think that's why he agreed to supervise me. He worked in Jamaica. And he had a particular view about how I should approach societies everywhere based on a framework which he used, which I wasn't very comfortable with. And I had to really negotiate very, very delicately, to the point, in order to get my perspective across. And I think that sometimes we all have to do that. But in the end, he respected my view, and I was able to write what I wanted. And as I suppose from that time, I've been able to write what I wanted. Other students in my institution were not lucky, not so lucky. There were, as I said, there were plenty of blacks, not plenty, but enough black students around, or BME, students around. And I have to say, my network wasn't just black, African and Caribbean. I had Indian friends, many of them coming from the continent. I had Pakistani friends, and even though they've gone back to, I've kept in touch with them. I had Chinese friends who were from Hong Kong, and in fact, if you look at the day I got my PhD, it looked like it's the United Nations, because there were all these people in the room from different backgrounds, and it was really wonderful. But some of them weren't as lucky as me in terms of having a forgiving or helpful supervisor. Some of the students didn't finish their PhDs because their supervisor didn't read what they wrote, right? Some actually finished, but they fell out with their supervisor, and it was really difficult for the university to find someone else because everybody knew each other and so on, and they found it very difficult to move on. So I think what's important is, finding somebody who's a supervisor who's reliable, who's good, and because that person is going to be with you for a long time, that person is going to be your referee. And you can fall out with your supervisor. I'm sure we as certainly BME people, black people, we know how to negotiate through spaces because we've done that most of our lives, right? But if you fall out with them, you lose a referee, a critical referee, when in terms of you getting employed and so on, because often the field that you're in is quite narrow and everybody will know each other. So I think it's a very difficult, process, but do try to negotiate it. I think it's really important to build a network of trusted supporters and they should be at different stage in their academic career. It's great to have people at the same level as you because one, you want people to read and comment on your work. You need to find some trusted friends or other people who are writing who will comment on your work. That's really important. Getting that feedback before you submit your work to a journal. I mean, I have to admit, I haven't always had that feedback, even with some of my black friends, because they're always too busy or doing all sorts of things, and they never have time, But it's really important to have one or two people who are similar areas, and you can throw off ideas to each other. So that network of trusted supporters is important, because you will need that. I mean, it's awful to talk in such a strategic way, but I think it's really important, because you'll need that network to build your career, right? You need that network. If you look at grant applications now, right, when you finish and you're trying to get a big grant, they require a network of people from different institutions, often multidisciplinary teams and so on. And if you're going to do that, you need to have people, different disciplines, probably working on the same theme in order to be able to, and sometimes across different countries, and now even across European countries, if you want to access EU funding. Stop me if I'm going on too long. So access to funding, critical, comments on your papers, organize conferences as well. I think it's really important for you to start to attend conferences, right? And to present papers at conferences. That network can help you. I use my network I have a network in the US. So whenever I'm going to the African Studies Association conference, I said, you want to go this year? We'll organize a panel. And we organize a panel. Sometimes, the last time there were just 3 of us. And they scheduled us at 8 a.m. in the morning. So it was criminal, but our supporters turned out. So you can organize a panel, and you're down. As far as your institution is concerned, and as far as other people, you presented a paper at the conference. Doesn't matter if 1 or 2 people are in the room. So think about strategically building your career like that. I go to geography conferences, and there are very few geographers who are black, and it really frustrates me because sometimes in the States there are many more, but in Britain there are hardly any, and that's a real problem in my discipline. It is very much a white discipline, and sometimes I get really frustrated and say, I'm not coming again. Next year I'm not going. It's just too, it's just too problematic for me. But I do try to go to Africans. I go to the geography one in the United States, as I said, mainly because there are more black people there. There are more, people talking about things that I'm interested there, in the States. I go to the African Studies Conference there. I go to international studies. I'm going to the European International Studies Conference in Sicily in September. So I, try, and in a way, it's for me, building my network, but also meeting other people who might be doing similar work, and also showing my institution that I am, in a sense, participating in that international arena. I think you plot where you want to go in your career, and how to get there. I think be strategic. And I have to tell you, I wasn't strategic. I think because, I've got 2 minutes, I wasn't strategic, and I wasn't strategic because things just happened to me to some degree, accidentally sometimes, you know, opportunities came up. And I think you need to be strategic. You need to think, I mean, that's how I see young academics today, you know, particularly those in my department. They know how many papers they want to publish, they know what books they want to write, they have their network for collaboration. I think the last thing I want to say is about knowledge. And I think knowledge is a commodity, right? And as a commodity, it's an ephemeral commodity, and it's not material in that sense. So because it's not material, right, people can steal it from you and you have no recompense. You can't say, this was my idea, but so-and-so has taken it, right? And that has happened to me a lot, and it actually happens to a lot of white colleagues. So it happens to me, and it will probably happen to you. So you have a good idea, and you're talking to somebody about it. Next thing you know, they will go off and write up a grant application, and because they have power, because they have access to networks, they're likely to get that funding. And suddenly you're thinking, this is not my idea anymore. I can't move with this. And there are a few times when it's happened to me, where I'm giving you advice in a sense, but you might, you know, one of the things I've realized also over the years is that when you have an idea, don't present it at a conference. Don't give a preliminary paper at a conference, because people will steal your idea there and then. And you'll be out published before you even know it. So what I do now, I talk about things that have been published, that are in print, which, you know, and for me, that's well. And the other thing, of course, is that if you write critical stuff, finally, the last thing, if you write critical stuff, you're going to struggle to get them into mainstream journals. If you don't, I mean, the journals are really patrolled now by particular gatekeepers who who are not interested in things that challenge, right, sort of a particular hegemonic knowledge within the West. And so, even in my discipline, I tried to get a paper published about representation of Congolese sexual violence, and I mean some of the comments were just so horrible. I mean I got but I am going to publish it. But I sent it to a mainstream journal, and I actually know I think I can work out who the referees were, right? So if you're going to say something which is against grain, you have to be, you are not going to get into a mainstream journal. So you've got to think about how you publish things, where you publish it, and start, as I say, plotting your progress. Now sometimes you do, you have to get into those journals, so sometimes you do manipulate, you go along with them, and I've gone along with them, and in the end what comes up doesn't look like what I was thinking about in the first place, but you need to have that for your career, if you want to build your career. I'll stop there, and then
just to break it up a little bit, do we have any questions for Dr. Daniel? Anybody?
I have a question.
Okay.
You talked about the publication, publishing in mainstream. What about being strategic and publish in black publishers, especially in America?
Yeah, there are publications. In fact, there are black journals, but they don't necessarily cover all the themes that you want to write on. And nowadays, journals are ranked, as you probably are aware, right? And those black journals often, certainly within Britain and in my discipline, are not highly ranked in any way. But I publish I just publish wherever. A journal in India, I knew someone was starting up a journal in India in international studies, and he said, have you got a paper? I sent it. I don't actually care now where I publish, but it does really matter. If you want, it can matter if you're starting out, because the competition is really stiff. So you should be aiming for one of the top journals, but you don't just send your paper like that. You get people to comment on it. You really work on it. You get feedback. So when it goes there, they might still reject it because, as I say, they often are not keen to publish things that are critical. But you should aim at least to get something in one of those journals.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think my main concern is just trying to build that network. Like, is there anything, any suggestion or any idea to actually go about it these days that like building that network, so at least maybe in 20 years time you have something to work with?
I think start here.
Oh, yes,
It's an
yeah.
opportunity. There are people here, and as I say, one way of doing it is is going to conferences, right? And that helped me a lot. You know, I meet people. I mean, you know, I was in Tampa in last April. No, I was in I was in Indiana in November, and I met a number of Nigerian women who were working on similar things that I hadn't, because they had a panel on basically on war and gender in Nigeria, and I took their cards and I've started corresponding with them and so on. So yeah, you just have to get out there, and particularly I think it's expensive to travel to conferences in the US because the hotels are, they tend to have them in really expensive hotels. So as well, you know, you might get a cheap rate when hotels are expensive, but sometimes you can shop around the locality. But it's worth doing that and really trying to build up your network.
Thank you.
You said earlier about the university ranking system, just the ref system. So I'm so confused about the system. Just briefly outline it.
Oh, I don't know if I can outline REF. It's a government way of allocating. It's a mechanism that the government has developed to allocate resources or money to universities, and they rank each academic. You submit. It's so complicated now, to be honest, that I've stopped following what is going on, because they rank each department and each academic is actually given a grade, right? And they're given various departments given various grades for various things like academic excellence, international, number of people who are international profile, for example, in the department. Then they read all that you have published, right? So you have to submit articles or books or whatever, and they'll read it. And that team, right, which is often made up of people you know, and sometimes people who you might not get on with, will be reading your stuff and will be grading it or ranking it. And that information will then be pooled together for each department, and then the department will get an overall mark. Now, another element of that is impact, which you might hear people are talking about. The government is really keen. A lot of the money is also determined according to whether your research has had an impact. And when you put in a grant application, you have to write loads about impact. Your impact statement, how you're going to disseminate. It's about dissemination. And they really want to control what research people do. It's a really good way of controlling. But yeah, a lot of academics have problems with it, but that's how money is allocated to universities. So the university will put pressure on you and if you are not refable, it means that your career is virtually over. Because you can't get grants, you can't, the research councils won't recognize you as a bona fide principal investigator. If you don't, if you're not refable, it means that you're not publishing to international or even national or international standards. Right? So it is difficult, and a lot of black academics have not put into ref, and that has implications for their career because the university. Yeah, the department will decide who they put in, and some departments will put in almost everybody. Some will put in a small number. I think my department has done well in the last 2 rounds, but even then apparently our impact statement was quite low, but we only put in 2 people's impacts, which was a bit ridiculous, but that was, it's, and it's not going to go away. So I think that's what I'm saying, have a plan.
Yeah, but actually, just to build on that strategicness, I mean, the ref cycles every 6 years, and when it comes up to ref, you won't get a job unless you have publications to be referenced. So if you are thinking, the next ref is 2020, 2018, 2019, they will be looking for people who can ref in their publications. So it is more of a pressure there before you finish your PhD to get these publications, so you can get the job when you finish. That's just how it works.
Alright, last question before we move on.
Okay. Thank you. You talked of reliable supervisors.
about
reliable supervisors.
reliable ones. Yeah.
I come from Africa, in Uganda, and most students have abandoned PhDs, postgraduate, master's level PhDs because of supervision. Supervisors don't give them time, and has become a big challenge now. I don't know, how do you get someone who's reliable?
It's really difficult. And I know the problem in many African universities. I know people are doing a range of, professors are doing a range of other things and therefore don't necessarily have the time. It's also a problem in universities in the UK, so it's not peculiar to Africa. And I think it's partly, I think you have to do a bit of research about their, find out who they're supervising, do a bit of research about their reputation and so on. And this is where, as I say, the network can help. There was one lad he started just before I left Oxford, finished my PhD, and when I left Oxford for 2 years. I went to teach in the US, and then I got a job back at Oxford, and he was just in his final year. And what was interesting, right, that it came to light that his supervisor never read anything that he had written. He was black South African, it was still apartheid. The guy had never written anything and read any of his work. And he didn't say anything. What the student did was to go and present his work at conferences to get feedback. So he signed up for everything and just presented and got feedback. And then when I came and he had a few supporters, then we would quickly read things for him as well to give him. And even when he came to submission, his supervisor was saying, you can't stay, you should go back to South Africa. And he said, but if I go, I might not be allowed back out. And he needed to stay 3 months for his viva, and the supervisor was opposed to it. I just said to him, just go and tell the people of your funding, you finish within 3 years. Well, I would be surprised if they wouldn't support you, and they did. So I'm just saying that there are people out there who you have to think about. How you negotiate your relationship with your supervisor, and what's interesting was that my friend went back to South Africa, you had the end of apartheid, he went into academia, then he set up his own consultancy, then he's now very, very comfortable, as you can imagine, he's now part of the South African bourgeoisie. And this guy goes there and meets him, and my friend takes him out for lunch and so on. As if, even though he never read everything he wrote. So I'm just saying that you've got to be strategic sometimes.
All right, I'll move on to
Thank you for the invite. Well done for setting this up as well. I mean, I'll actually start on the supervisor, because my supervisor was horrendous. In some ways it was horrendous, but actually in other ways it was fine. My supervisor is very similar, didn't read anything, didn't really give me any advice, but I actually quite liked that. And in some ways, it helped me, and that's me personally. It's not for everybody, because one of the things I had to learn quite quickly then was to be an expert in my own field. And I think this is really important to understand when you're doing your PhD. And talking to a lot of PhD students, as my wife is in a PhD, for example, and she has these problems all the time, is really seeing yourself as an expert in this field. Right? Your PhD topic, you're probably one of the very few people who are actually studying your PhD topic. So you probably know more about your topic than the supervisor knows about your topic. And you have to have a certain level of confidence in what you are saying. This is really important for academic career afterwards as well, right? It's really understanding that you know your stuff, you know what you're talking about. Yes, you want guidance from people, but when you do have these conflicts that we're talking about, you have to have the confidence to say, actually, that just doesn't make any sense. And this is the way I'm going to do it. This is my piece of work. You really have to see your PhD as your piece of work. And I think, so, as I say, my PhD supervisor was in some ways horrendous. I loved it because I could essentially do what I liked, and that meant really do what I liked, right? So, if you look at the theoretical background of my PhD, I'm a sociologist, but I don't really like mainstream British sociology at all, so I don't really use any of it. So, actually, the basis of my PhD is Malcolm X. Really, Malcolm X is the theory which underlies my PhD. Now, with a very pernickety, overseeing supervisor, that probably never would happen, right? I would have been steered in lots of other different ways. So there are advantages to not having much supervision, because actually you can do some different things. So that's one of the things I would recommend, is to think outside of the box. Depending on what subject you are in, there might not be the appropriate theoretical base to use. So don't use it. Create a new theoretical base, right? But that's about having that confidence, saying, well, actually, that just don't work for me. I want to do something else. I think that's something I would always say. It's risky again. It depends your field, certainly as well. But there are different ways to think about things. You do need to draw on alternative knowledge claims. I'm a sociology, PhD sociologist. My undergraduate was psychology. I went to the States for a bit and was exposed to black psychology. So I had different influences anyway for coming into the PhD. So that kind of helped not get stuck down this narrow route. And what I would say is that there's a reason why there's hardly any black people in academia, is because academia is Eurocentric. It is, and not just in people terms, but in knowledge terms. The knowledge claims, the knowledge base of it, you look at the reading list, it's Eurocentric. Yeah. So if you want to not do Eurocentric work, you have to then go outside the box. And your supervisor really might not have any idea what to do. But very clearly, this is your piece of work, so have the confidence to say, this is my piece of work. So doing things like presenting at conferences is good for that, really important because it shapes you early on. Especially if your supervisor isn't the best at reading things, it is a good way to get some feedback, some critical feedback from people. And organise stuff, organise your own stuff. And I think this is why it's really important with Black Doctoral Network. Now, if there are spaces which, academia is generally horrendously white, but there are enough others in here to organise our own thing. So one of the first things that we've done, we started it new and now we're doing it elsewise, is to have a Black Studies Association. So we're putting together a Black Studies Association, we're going to have a journal, we're having a major conference, we had a major conference in 2013, having another conference in October, the details, essentially we're having it's Blackness in Britain, 2-day conference. Patricia Hill Collins is coming down, and some other American scholars as well. And we're just creating a space, and everybody's kind of surprised, like, wow, I'm more surprised it hasn't happened before, right? Because I think in some senses we can be a bit afraid sometimes to put our heads above the parapet. But just do it, right? You'll be surprised. When you organise things, you'll be surprised what things come of it. Actually, I now teach at Birmingham City University, and there's lots of negatives about the way the universities have gone in terms of marketisation and commercialisation. Actually, one of the positives is, if it looks like something popular, they'll support it. So actually, I'm finding at Birmingham City University, I can literally say I'm going to put an event on about anything, and they'll go, yeah, it's fine, have some money. I'm just really surprised. Let's have a Malcolm X youth conference, and they love the idea. I was like, okay, let's have a Malcolm X youth. Let's have a year events about Malcolm X. And they're like, yeah, great, have a year events about Malcolm X. So you'll be surprised what you can do if you just try and do it, but also have the confidence about it, right? So if someone challenges me and says, actually, Malcolm X, he's not a theorist, etc., I'll slap them down because it's not true, right? I have the confidence to do and the background to do it as well. And that's something you just need to grasp. Right? This is your piece of work, you are an expert in this, etc., etc. And don't be afraid to rely on alternative knowledge. There was something else particularly I wanted to say. Yeah, also, don't be discouraged as well. I think that's important. So I spent the third year of my undergraduate degree was partly doing school psychology, partly based in the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I swear, when I came out of Harvard, I was like, there's no way I ever want to go anywhere near academia again because it's so elite, so it's not for me. I literally came back saying, forget about it, I'll go and do something else. But you can't be discouraged by these things. Yes, that is largely what it's like. It's largely what it's like in other places. But there is space to do different stuff. There's space in Redwood University to do different stuff. But the other thing about the expansion of universities are, well, not all universities are Redwood. I work at Birmingham City University, previously was a polytechnic, just coming into research. And again, this is part of the reason why I'm just going to say I'm going to do some research. They go, fair enough, do some research. And I get a lot of support to do stuff because they don't have any research there. So there's lots of spaces to do things if you just strategically place yourself in the right places. And there are networks which you can draw on, Black Studies Association, Black Doctoral Networks. There's lots of networks. People are really friendly as well. I think you'd be surprised how friendly people are, supportive people are. So building your own personal network is important as well. Like I said, my supervisor was horrendous. We had quite a big falling out because he literally hadn't read my PhD. I needed to submit it because I was applying for a postdoc. And they said, postdoc, you have to have submitted your PhD by this date. And I finished it a long time. I've been sending them chapters and I needed to submit it. And he basically said, I haven't read it, you can't submit it. That was his basic answer. You can't submit it, I haven't read it. And again, at this point, it's about having the confidence to say, I was like, no, it's good enough. It's my piece of work, I'm submitting it. That's it, right? It is actually your decision whether you submit your PhD or not. They might think it's not yours, but it's your piece of work. So if you push it, you can submit it. This also involved me being resourceful, finding my own external examiner and my own internal examiner. But again, that was actually a good thing, because I picked the right people. Yeah. number one thing about examining is pick the right person. If you pick the wrong person, you're going to be in trouble. You pick the right person, you'll probably be alright. So that's really important. Make sure you have input in your external examiner. You don't. In fact, the external examiners, my PhD supervisor was suggesting, I wouldn't be here today. Really, I don't think I'd even have got a PhD. You have to be really particular about who it is you're picking to examine. Also, don't be discouraged about. So, for example, when I was finishing my PhD, I'm actually one of the last people. I might be the last person. Certainly one of the last people at the University of Birmingham to have a PhD in sociology and cultural studies. In the last year, when I was finishing my PhD, they closed the department. Literally closed it down. We had big campaigns about keeping the department open, etc., etc., etc. Lots and lots of things happened that could have destabilised. We were quite a close group when we were finishing. And these things happened, and it could have destabilised us and not led us to finish it. But you just have to carry on. Effectively, once you started something, you're doing something, you need to carry on. And also, and this is probably the most important piece of advice you hear about PhD, your PhD is the beginning of your career. It is not the end of your career. It's probably the worst thing you're ever going to write. I don't even think I PhD that long ago, and I'm looking back at that and go, really? That's what I wrote? I'm reading it, this is awful, generally. So, it's just something, so when you think about being strategic, you have to be strategic about your PhD. Don't spend too long doing it, right? It's a piece of work, you have to get it to a certain grade to do it. Once you've done it, it's done, right? And I said it will be the worst piece of work you write, because you develop, you move on, you write other stuff, you literally, I'm 4 years back on PhD, and the level of work is just, it's much, much better than it was. So it's just something to do and to get done, and then you can move on from it. So, yeah. And I think, what am I getting? I have to plug something actually. I'm going to plug, not for a book actually. This is actually plugging alternative knowledge claims. Because one of the things I'm doing research-wise is we started an organisation, the Organisation of Black Unity in Birmingham. And this is a kind of radical organisation. I say that my inspiration is Malcolm X, the organisation's inspiration is Malcolm X. So when we're talking about alternative knowledge claims, one of the things we want to do with both that organisation and the Black Studies Association is to say, look, there's other forms of knowledge you can draw on, and these forms are legitimate. This is one of the reasons why I want to start a journal. One of the reasons why we're trying to really encourage people to write different stuff. I mean, the problem is the stuff that's written at the minute is Eurocentric, so let's write some other stuff, right, that people can then draw on. And one of the very basic we started on with the organisation is we put together a black history booklet, but it's not just a history booklet where you pick random selections of black people, as you typically find in history, with these kind of history books. We actually picked a particular history. So this is the Power of the Movement, Pioneers of the Fight for Black Liberation. And it's 17 people who have been involved in revolutionary struggles going back to Queen Nzinga in Angola, Africa's earliest, Zumbi in Brazil, Asante Shakur, Steve Biko. So a little bit of information about all of them. It's only £2 if you want to buy one, and I have a few years. And it also supports the organisation. But I would just say, make sure you're confident in what you're doing, and also organise your own stuff and set your own stuff up.